And good afternoon, everyone. TJ Ald's I-45 now. Welcome to another edition of Health Care Unmasked presented by UTMB Health. Delay in the show. Do forgive us for that because obviously we had a hurricane coming ashore last week that we had to pay attention to. An important subject we'll be talking about today, though, is about dementia and Alzheimer's. And joining us are the experts from UTMB. First, let me bring into the show here Dr. Rafael Samper-Ternent. He is with UTMB's Health's Seeley Center for Aging. And then also joining us is Dr. Giulio Taglialatela. I'm going to butcher the name all the way through, Dr. G. So how about that we just keep it that way with
great.
you on that. And he is the Lawrence Del Papa Distinguished Chair of at UTMB Health for neurodegenerative disease. It's a long title, research, and he is a professor and vice chair of research in the Department of Neurology there at UTMB as well. So we appreciate you both coming on. A little bit later in the show too. Obviously, when we talk about Alzheimer's dementia, we're not talking about just the folks who suffer from this deadly disorder, but also those who have to care for them. And you'll be hearing from Anita Laffey, and her last name is appropriate. She encourages folks to keep on laughing, and it keeps you the positive to go through. She'll be joining us a little bit later as well. Dr. Rafael and Giulio, thank you all for coming on with us here today. It's an important topic, and we hope that we'll get a lot of questions answered for folks here today about where we are and where we're maybe headed in research along the way. And we do appreciate you coming on. And again, if you have questions, folks, you can go ahead and post those in the comment section. We'll be more than glad to answer those for you. I thought, Dr. G, we'd start with you here about Alzheimer's itself. And I wanted to start off just with this because as you look at things about what Alzheimer's does, a lot of folks think they know what Alzheimer's is or dementia is, but then as we find out more and more that we know less about it than we know of it. Is that a fair assessment there?
Well, yeah, it is a fair assessment. And in fact, the more we study this disease and the more we realize that there are many different aspects of this disease that we didn't know before. First of all, dementia is a general term that indicates a reduction of our intellectual capability or our cognitive ability and may have many, many different causes. Alzheimer is the most common form of age-associated dementia. So that's the first distinction. Dementia is a general term, and whereas Alzheimer is a specific disease, and which is characterized by the presence of two atypical proteins in the brain that are called the amyloid beta on the one hand and tau on the other hand. And these proteins that are normally functioning within our brain, they misbehave, if you will, and they become very sticky, they aggregate, and they form, respectively, what we know called the senile plaques in the brain and the neuro formed by amyloid beta and the neurofibrillary tangles, which are again formed by the tau protein. So these two proteins aggregates and deposits characterized the Alzheimer brain. And with them, the more they accumulate, eventually the clinical symptoms begin to appear. And I'll let Rafael, who's a clinician, to describe those clinical symptoms. But from the pathological point of view, there is the accumulation in the brain of these proteins that are known by many different years to become very, very toxic to the brain cells. What we know now that we didn't know previously is that, in fact, this pathology can begin 10, 20, even 30 years before any clinical symptoms become evident. And so this has, of course, led to important questions, including how do we discover this pathology that are accumulating in people that are still relatively young and maybe in brains that can still respond to possible therapies. And that's part of the current research, but we can go over that later, of course. But probably Rafael wants to add from the clinical symptoms.
Yeah, Rafael, particularly, I wanted to ask you along these lines of, where are we now in the battle against Alzheimer's and dementia diseases compared to 10 years ago? And to pick up on what Dr. G was saying there.
Yeah, so I'll start by building a little bit on what Dr. Taglialatela just mentioned. So there are clear, specific criteria to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. So you need to identify changes in cognitive function in different areas. Social cognition is something that is relatively new in how we diagnose dementia, and it's the inability for many of the patients with Alzheimer's disease to be empathetic to what's happening in their surrounding, in their environment. So when we talk about Alzheimer's disease, there is a very clear set of criteria that we need to follow to get to that diagnosis. And so the umbrella term of dementia is just that, an umbrella where several diseases fall under it, and Alzheimer's is just the most prevalent one. To answer your question, TJ, so where are we compared to 10 years ago? So with Dr. Taglialatela and you, we discussed this a little bit. So there is a dim light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that is great. So we're finally seeing that we have technology, that we have resources, that we have a large investment by the National Institutes of Health on research for identifying early markers for Alzheimer's disease and for identifying technologies that will let us control this disease that is so devastating for people and their families. But I think one of the biggest advances in the last 10 years is that we have recognized that we have a lot of tools that we are not using, but we should be using to both prevent Alzheimer's disease and manage the disease. So the Lancet, it's one of those big medical journals that we all have to read as part of medical school, published in 2017 and recently updated the data on what are the most important risk factors related to Alzheimer's disease. And I believe we're going to see the image later, and if not, we can go over those risk factors. But it's really clear what things we can work on. Yeah, that's the image. So this is from the Lancet. This was updated last year. And if you look at the bubbles, so let's start with the green bubble on top. It tells you that low education explains 7% of the risk factors for developing dementia. And people might say, well, 7% is not much, but it's a significant contributor, and it's something that we can take care of. And then as we move through our life, so that's something that marks us from beginning to end, and we could potentially fix that by getting more education. And then as we move through our lives, there are risk factors in midlife that are very, very important, and most of them are potentially addressable. So as you can see, the big blue bubble on top, it's hearing loss. So we don't recognize, and people don't recognize, the importance of sensory deprivation in midlife and the impact that it could have later in life. And you just pop in a device in your ear that amplifies, and for most people, that is a quick fix for hearing loss. That is a big risk factor. Traumatic brain injury, so the use of helmets and motorcycles and bicycles, protecting your brain is always a great thing because it's going to be very useful later in life. Controlling hypertension, and this is a big issue. Unfortunately, we've seemed to reach a plateau where people treat their hypertension, but we haven't been past that threshold where we are able to convince people that even a small decrease in your blood pressure can have a huge impact later in life. Alcohol consumption, controlling obesity. And then if we move down to factors later in life, then things like smoking, controlling depression, social isolation. So we're in a pandemic. A lot of older adults have been isolated for more than 18 months, it's really disheartening to see people that haven't been able to talk to their families in person for a long, long time. And that's going to have an impact on your brain function. Physical inactivity and air pollution was added this year as a huge contributor to brain function at late ages. And finally, diabetes. So I think we have a pretty good knowledge that accounts for 40% of potentially modifiable risk factors that could prevent people from getting Alzheimer's disease.
But then there's that 60% where it's unknown out there. Correct. And that becomes the great big mystery, as a lack of a better term here, trying to figure out what's that other 60%. I wanted to back up on the first one you brought up here, is in the question about early on, less education. Is that something where, based on that research, that it's because someone's mind's not as engaged on problem solving and the like you would have in an educational setting, that it's the lack of a better term, you're not exercising your brain early on, and that may be why that may be a factor?
Yeah, so a lot of people like to use a simile between the brain being like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. So if you don't train it, you don't develop it. And so education in early life is setting you up to how much, and this is a technical term that we use, cognitive reserve you're going to have. So cognitive reserve, think of it as an air cushion, where you're building an air cushion that even if you get a lot of the things that Dr. Taglialatela talked about, the tangles and the plaques, even if you get many of those, you have a lot of connections between the cells in your brain that actually allow it to work, even though some of them are damaged. And so the more education you get early in life, and the more education you get throughout your life, actually increases that air cushion. And that way you're able to maintain your normal function for a longer time, until your brain is so overwhelmed with the plaques and the tangles that the onset of dementia is evident and the decline actually happens.
And again, yes, we have this, and you said this was just redone last year, correct? Mm-hmm. How long, though, when you take a look at it, how long has Alzheimer's been actually seriously looked at as a disease where we're trying to find this information? How long did it take us to get from what we thought we knew before to this, what we have now?
So probably a couple of decades. So we've known about Alzheimer's disease for a long time. It's been reported since the 1906 was when Eloise Alzheimer's case was reported to the world. And since then, it took us several decades to actually get to the amount of knowledge. And that there are several reasons for that. So one, we've been getting better at diagnosing it. So we actually have a better idea of how many cases we actually have. But the other reason is, as we've become more and more aware of the impact on society of Alzheimer's disease, then more and more resources are being devoted into actually understanding this. So to get to that graph, it took the Lancet a lot of work to go over a lot of studies funded by different research agencies to be able to get to that conclusion. So it's probably in the last 2 decades where the budget for research for Alzheimer's has significantly increased to the levels where we can get the knowledge that we have right now.
One of the things that the NIH has a video you shared with me, Rafael, that I want to share part of it. Now, the audio won't be as clear for folks here, so just warning you. So we may narrate a little bit of this, but I wanted to at least show a portion of this now, so folks can have an idea of how the effects of how Alzheimer's changes the brain, and so people have a better idea of that.
In healthy people, all sensations, movements, thoughts, memories, and feelings are the result of signals that pass through billions of nerve cells or neurons in the brain. Neurons constantly communicate with each other through electrical charges that travel down axons, causing the release of chemicals across tiny gaps to neighboring neurons. Other cells in the brain, such as astrocytes and microglia, clear away debris and help keep neurons healthy. In a person with Alzheimer's disease, the most basic form of dementia, toxic changes in the brain destroy this healthy balance. These changes may occur years, even decades, before the first signs of dementia. Researchers believe that this process involves two proteins called beta amyloid and tau, which somehow become toxic to the brain. It appears that abnormal tau accumulates, eventually forming tangles inside neurons. And beta amyloid clumps into plaques, which slowly build up between neurons. As the level of amyloid reaches a tipping point, there is a rapid spread of tau throughout the brain. But tau and beta amyloid may not be the only factors involved in Alzheimer's. Other changes that affect the brain may also play a role over time. The vascular system may fail to deliver sufficient blood and nutrients to the brain. The brain may lack the glucose needed to power its activity. Chronic inflammation sets in as microglial cells fail to clear away debris, and astrocytes react to distressed microglia. Eventually, neurons lose their ability to communicate. As neurons die, the brain shrinks, beginning in the hippocampus, a part of the brain important to learning and memory. People may begin to experience memory loss, impaired decision-making, and language problems. As more neurons die throughout the brain, a person with Alzheimer's gradually loses the ability to think, remember, make decisions, and function independently. Achieving a deeper understanding of the molecular and cellular mechanisms and how they may interact is vital to the development of effective therapies. Much progress has been made in identifying various underlying factors. Advances in brain imaging allow us to see the course of plaques and tangles in the living brain. Blood and fluid biomarkers are providing insights about when the disease starts and how it progresses. More is also known about the genetic underpinnings of the disease and how they can affect particular biological pathways. These advances enable the development and testing of promising new therapies, including drugs that reduce or clear the increase of tau and amyloid proteins in the brain, therapies targeting the vascular system, glucose metabolism, and inflammation, and lifestyle interventions like exercise or diet, and behavioral approaches like social engagement that may enhance brain health. Research is moving quickly, ever closer to the day when we can delay or even prevent the devastation of dementia.
And that comes into the prevent or cure, and that goes into the real challenge that's here. There's always looking for that magic pill that's out there, and it just doesn't exist. And I just want to talk about how close we are right now with what treatments are available out there, with medications that are available, what is showing great promise on helping folks, no matter what the stages are that they're dealing with, either some type of dementia disorder or Alzheimer's.
Well, if Rafael agrees, I think we need to really understand a little bit better some of the molecular mechanisms in order to really understand the drugs that are available right now. Because you see, in the last 10 or maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, there has been an important switch in our understanding of what is the toxicity within the brain. 15 years ago, we were all focused on amyloid beta, one of the two toxic proteins we just heard of in the video. It turns out, and at that time, tau was almost undermined its effect. It turns out by recent studies that, in fact, the two proteins might have two distinct roles within the brain. Imagine like what happened to the brain is like firing a gun, and amyloid beta is the trigger, but the real bullet that causes damages is in fact tau. So what happens that when the disease becomes symptomatic, the bullet has been fired. And so therapies that were very hopeful at the beginning, targeting amyloid beta, as I'm sure Rafael will tell us, revealed to be much less effective than what we hoped for. And this mechanism, where tau is the real downstream toxic event, may be consistent with the idea that once you fire the gun, you can mess around with the trigger, but the damage that's been done by the bullet is already there. Maybe you can prevent a further bullet to be fired. Mm-hmm. And so the efficacy of these interventions are much lower than expected. The other thing I would like to say, which is relevant to some of the discussion that has been going on, is that despite this pathology, and it's very important to factor in the cognitive reserve that Rafael mentioned, and we also heard in the video, is a real key point. There are recent observations coming from many different groups, including mine here at UTMB, has clearly shown the existence of individuals that have a full-blown pathology in terms of plaques and tangles in their brain, but they're cognitively normal. And they die without any evidence of dementia. So there is a way the human brain, our brain, can cope, resist, and become resilient to the cognitive devastation brought about by this series of events, molecular and cellular events. Now, the interesting thing would be, can we understand how these individuals manage to cope with the devastation brought about and therefore remain cognitively intact? This is an important line of research that might reveal new drugs, new treatment options, where instead of repairing the damage that might have partially already occurred, this new treatment may make the brain of anyone that is challenged by this pathology resilient to further damage of that pathology. So the spectrum becomes very wide, understanding the molecular and cellular basis. Rafael, would you like to comment on drug treatment available?
Sure. So I think what you said is very, very true, and I think that's so. In some ways, I think the trip or the voyage through Alzheimer's disease discovery has been full of barriers, but I think it has also been a great opportunity to what you just mentioned. It is to realize that there are several places where we might be finding benefits or help. And I think that's been one of the great things about reporting negative findings related to Alzheimer's disease, is that it's been an opportunity for other groups or even the same groups to move into different directions and try to find, so to broaden the focus on where we should be going if we really want to take care of that. So in terms of medications, we're very limited. As you mentioned at the beginning of the disease, so 20 years ago, we came up with 4 different medications that until June of this year were the only options that we had. They were not disease-modifying medications, so they didn't actually change the structure. They basically allowed, so it was like a post office. So it allowed the guy in the little cart to deliver more letters, but the recipients were still dying. So the cells were still dying, and we were simply delaying the decline in cognitive function. The most known medication is Aricept because it's been around the longest. It's an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So basically what it does is it increases the amount of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain, that allows it to be a little more effective in some of its activities. From the same group, there are 2 additional medications, rivastigmine and blanking on the other one. Rivastigmine and it'll come back to me. So there are 3 from the same group. They work basically in the same mechanism. All they do is increase acetylcholine. And then we have memantine, which is different, and it acts through a different mechanism. and it's a medication that it has been approved for moderate and late stages of dementia, and it activates the brain. So it allows it to have a little more energy, if you may, and it allows people that are lost all of their motivation and that basically stay in bed all the time to be a little more active and a little more functional for a longer time. But until June of this year, those were the only 4 options that we had in terms of management of Alzheimer's disease. In June, the FDA approved Aduhelm or aducanumab, which is a new type of medication. And TJ, I don't know if you want us to go to that now, or if you want.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up is, and we talked about this in our pre-show discussion. In June, the FDA gave tentative approval to Biogens Aduhelm, and just in a quick, because as you had talked about, there was, as a matter of fact, it was tagged as controversial. I'm not so sure how controversial it may be. It didn't have a whole lot of data with it, and that was one of the concerns I know. How effective is it really? And obviously, we see these headlines when, particularly when we're dealing with diseases that folks are desperate, just desperate to find something that makes someone better on. And we're seeing that in many levels with COVID as well. How effective is it really? And what should families and patients know about Aduhelm as compared to what is already been approved and is being used on a common basis right now?
Okay, so it's a totally new medication. So like with COVID, where we used new technology to develop an effective vaccine, this is new technology to develop a medication. So unlike the other 4 medications that I mentioned, the one that I was forgetting was Glantamine. So unlike Glantamine, rivastigmine, and donepezil and memantine, this is an antibody that actually acts against amyloid beta. So it's directed to amyloid beta. If you remember the video, it goes directly and tries to destroy the amyloid beta that has accumulated in the brain. So that makes it a very innovative, in a way, approach to Alzheimer's disease. All the controversy around this medication, and I want to tell you, I'm excited that in 20 years we haven't had a new development, and this is a new development that shows that we're moving in the right direction. However, the questions related to this medication come from different points. So one is the approval process, because FDA has a very strict approval process on how it gets medications from research into the hands of patients. And that process was out of the ordinary. So the process was followed, but there were still a lot of questions, and not everyone in the panel was as convinced with the data that was provided by the lab. And so that was a big point of discussion. A lot of people want more data before they actually start giving this medication to people that have dementia. The other big question is the target population. This medication is intended for early stages of the disease, and the criteria are very specific. So when I start studying a new medication, I have to set a group of criteria so I can put people into my study and then prove whether the medication works or not. The criteria are very strict into how severe the decline in your memory needs to be, what type of patient you want to, how far into the disease you want to be. And so this is not a medication that is going to be available or should be made available for everyone that has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. This is a medication intended for very early stages to delay the decline related to Alzheimer's disease.
And that's an important thing about this. And I think you said something that was very key at the beginning of that, which is the good thing about this is we're moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time in so many years that we've actually had something at least get some type of FDA approval to come to the market. Mm-hmm. So we're moving in the right direction. But also, too, it is still not, nor will we may ever see, that magic pill. The Correct. Single cure or the single thing that's going to make you better. It is very specific for a certain area. So, and I do think we're seeing this a lot with COVID, particularly of that we're trying to catch the one thing so we don't have to do it. The whole thing about Johnson and Johnson's vaccine shot. Oh, one shot and I'm done. Well, we have found now that that's not necessarily true either. They're even saying get a booster. And so, particularly in Alzheimer's, and full disclosure to our audience here, I have two parents dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's in one case. My wife, both her parents died of Alzheimer's. So it is not something that's uncommon in my family as well. And it's the personal relationship here that, we're always in the same kind of mode, which is every time a headline comes up, every time, and I will give you, she's doing an excellent job on 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, who has been researching this and following a study that's followed the same folks along the way a long time on this, that we are riveted, and we watched every single second of those, which anyone who has someone suffering from Alzheimer's or any form of advanced dementia is doing. But it is take it in the dose, and I'm not saying medical dose, but take it for what it really means, right? Don't go out there and run and tell your doctor, here's what I need for my husband. Here's what I need for my mom. Here's what I need for my dad. Is that a fair thing to make sure we caution people on?
Yes, totally. It's very specific for a very specific group of people with cognitive impairment, so mild cognitive impairment probably, and it's not going to work for everyone. There are side effects that have been reported by the lab that we still need to get our heads around with. And there is the matter of cost that has been highlighted in all the news around. So if you take all of that, so the question that a lot of clinicians get is, okay, would you give it to your patients? If it's the right patient and if it's the right timing, yes. Would I give it to all patients? Definitely not.
And in fact, you talked about the cost. Philip Huster put in $50,000 a year, and that's and for folks who are desperate, they'll spend any amount of money. And I know that, but you had told me yesterday, I wanted to reemphasize that there are already treatments, therapies, things that you can do to help out that may be, quite frankly, in the long run, more effective at this point.
Yeah. So I think there are two. So one of the good things about all the research and the money going into dementia research is that I think we've broken management of dementia into two groups. So one is everything we discussed with Dr. Taglialatela, where it's identifying the pathways and looking for new molecules and new medications. But the other is we already have several million people living in the US and several more million living in the world with Alzheimer's disease. And so we've realized that we also need to focus on improving care on them and finding things that will help them as they move in their journey through dementia. And I think those are the two areas where we've made significant advancements: how to educate caregivers, how to provide support for caregivers, how to keep people active even if they have dementia, so we can prevent other complications and we can prevent behavioral alterations. So there's a myriad of things that we're currently looking at that I think are as or even more important. So because at one point we were just so focused on getting the magic pill that we forgot about families, we forgot about caregivers, we forgot that we needed to provide and do things for them, because none of us were trained to care for someone with dementia. None of us. Right. So it's a process that you learn as you live it, and we were not providing any support for caregivers. And that's been a huge change in the last couple of years.
And that's the perfect transition now. Let's bring in Anita Laffey. Now we're talking about caregivers and those who are on the front lines of this, who are just as important to me anyway, is to the medical doctors doing the research and the medical doctors doing the treatment there. Rafael, Dr. G, y'all hang on there. We're going to come back to you here in just a little bit. For those of you just joining us, this is UTMB presents Health Care Unmasked. We're talking about Alzheimer's disease, and we have a lot of questions, and we're going to get to your questions here in a little bit. Anita, thanks for joining us. Do appreciate it. Tell us your personal story first here, because your husband deals with a form of dementia.
Yes, thank you. And before I do that, I want to say, TJ, I'm sorry about what your family is experiencing, because it is painful. It is really painful. And also, thank you for the doctors and the people on the panel that are giving us information and helping us to look forward to what hopefully is going to be on the horizon that will help. And the last comment about none of us were trained to be caregivers. Let me tell you, that's the truth. I have a master's degree in counseling. I was a professional counselor for 25 years. I was in charge of mental health services with the Red Cross as a volunteer for 15 years. And this has just kicked the stuffings out of me. I feel like a total nincompoop. I might as well not have gone to school. I'm learning by the seat of my pants. So for those people out there that are caretakers and you feel stupid and uninformed and incompetent, me too. Welcome to the party. That's what it's like. The way that we got started on this, I'm married to the sweetest guy in the world. His name is John Laffey, and it is the right name. It's not Lafferty. It's not LaFay. It's Laffey. Yes, that's my sweetheart, and he is a delight. He's always been goofy, just as sweet as he can be, but he has attention deficit disorder, and he has dyslexia, and he keeps me laughing. We were driving through a town before he got dementia, and this is before, but he's still goofy. So we're driving through a town, and he looks at the sign on a store, and he says, "Oh, honey, let's stop and get some ice cream here. There's a creamery." Isn't that this? See how nice he is? He's just shaking hands with he makes everybody feel welcome and feel loved. So we're going through this town, and John says, "Let's stop at this creamery and get some ice cream." And I look at the sign and I say, "Honey, I don't think they have ice cream there. It says crematorium," which is, and he just cracks me up. And even now he does. And I'll tell you more about that. But a year and a half ago, I suddenly, he's always done goofy things, but it dawned on me a year and a half ago that he made a significant financial mistake, and he didn't remember it. He didn't even know what it was, and it cost us. It was a mistake that was $1,000. So that's something that was really shocking, and it finally dawned on me that this was more, that he's showing a friend there how to pan for gold. He's great at, he's got all these different hobbies, but he made this mistake and he didn't recognize it. And I realized this is more than just being goofy. This is more than attention deficit disorder and dyslexia. And so I had him tested at UTMB, and the diagnosis came out Parkinson's with Lewy body dementia. And Lewy body dementia is a little bit unique in that it causes behavior like extreme nightmares and fighting and yelling and screaming and just acting. There's a lot of behavioral things that are out of control, in addition to the inability to understand what's going on. So for the last year and a half, I have been trying to figure out, how do you take care of a person whose brain is disappearing? And how do I make the transition? It's like I married a husband, but now I have a son. I'm a mother, and he's my son. And this, I never bargained for that. And it makes me cry. It makes me angry. And so I'm just in the process of learning how to do that. And I have found some things that work sometimes. Nothing works all the time, but some things do.
And on that line, when you talk about, you have a support group, you just talked about that. In fact, we should note the blouse and then the flower in your hair, that was at the request of the support group, right? Talk about how that support group has been so important to you in getting through. And I'm sure you also, being a part of that, has been a big part of helping others.
Yes, it's like we help each other. We wrap our arms around one another. And I've never even met these ladies except one person, and I think there's about 12 to 15 in this Zoom group. And it's sponsored by UTMB, but it's my understanding that it's open to anyone. So there is information on how to get into a support group. But I don't know how people make it through without having other people to talk to. You know, our faith is really important, but I feel like the little boy in the storm one time that was thunder and lightning, and he cried out for his mom, and she came to his side, and he said he was scared. And she said, well, honey, you know, Jesus is here with you, and he listens to you day and night, so you're never alone. And he said, yes, but mommy, sometimes I need someone with skin on. And I'm like that. We all are like that. We need someone with skin on that will listen to us and also help us help us judge whether we're sane or insane, because this situation makes you feel like you're crazy. The person that you're taking care of is perfectly normal. You take them to the grocery store and everything's fine. And then the next moment they do something that's just off the wall. And so you think, well, am I overreacting? The guilt is overwhelming. I never feel like I've done things right. I don't have a sounding board. I don't have a criteria to tell myself whether what I'm doing is right or wrong. So my support group is wonderful. They tell me, thank God, they tell me I'm normal. And the situation is what's not normal. And it really helps. You just got to have somebody else help you evaluate that. Sometimes we do need to make changes. Sometimes I'm overreacting or I'm getting angry at something that John can't control. And so I need to find a different way. But for me, there is absolutely no substitute for that support group.
And in fact, as we were preparing for this show, UTMB and the Seeley Center of Aging got together, and we've provided the link for you in the chat area, both UTMB and we have now. These are Alzheimer's caregiver resources for you that you can go through. And there's links there and phone numbers. The link is on our site. Please go to that, and you can click on there. And as Anita mentioned to you, there's a support group through UTMB Health, and you don't have to be a UTMB patient, or your family member doesn't have to be a UTMB patient in order to get help on that too. And we do encourage you to get a hold of the Seeley Center for Aging. And as I said, I can give you a personal account of how well this organization, part of UTMB Health, works with people to go through. I wonder, Anita, because this is the one, and by the way, the resources, we also have put them in Spanish there too, for you as well. Let me ask you though, Anita, because this is the most common question not common question or comment maybe, that I get from folks who are family members who have someone who's suffering from this. They said, you know what? There was stuff that happened 5 years ago now, that if I was just paying attention,
oh, absolutely.
Do you find yourself doing that in relation to what you've gone through with John?
Yes. That saying about hindsight is better than foresight. That's really true. We just, when you live with a person, you get accustomed to what they normally do. And so I just love that picture. Isn't that great?
I will tell you, when I saw that come over to me here, and I've lost my note. Who is he holding here in this photo?
He's holding our one and only great grandchild. And I love that. But it makes me cry when I see that picture too, because if I get too emotional here, I have to break it up. So if you hear me say, speaking of dogs, that means I've got to get out of this topic for a minute, and I'll come back later.
Right.
Got an echo. Do you hear an echo?
No, I think it is on your end there, but it may be feeding back a little bit there, Anita. Sorry. But it gets into the fact of, here is the person you love. Yeah. This is the guy. I take it from, this is the first photo you sent over to me, and you said, this is who you know.
Yes.
Not the person you're dealing with today.
That's right. This is the man that I made an appointment, or scheduled a trip to go to California to see this precious little baby boy, so that John could be able to hold him and know who he is now, because eventually he won't. And I wanted him to meet this wonderful little boy while he still had enough memory and enough cognitive ability to do that. But he thoroughly enjoyed being with the little boy and the family. But I can also tell you that on the way over on the way over to California to see this family. As we're flying over and been planning the trip for a couple of months, we're flying over, and John looks out the window, and then he turns to me and he says, "Do you have any idea where in the world this plane is flying to?" And it's just heartbreaking, because he had already lost the ability to understand what we were doing. So yeah, he's such a sweetheart. He's such a delight. And it makes me feel sad that the rest of you will never know this remarkable man. Yeah.
That is the one thing I will tell you. My wife says to me constantly, having met her mom, we, obviously didn't start dating until late in life. And at this time, her mom had already was in stages of Alzheimer's. But, it was one of those things. And she always would say, "I just wish you knew my mom went." And obviously, and I have found myself telling folks, folks who know my father, who's a well-read man, loves baseball and, outgoing, everything else, big time personality. My mom, the same way, great artist and everything else. And to see them now compared to what they were,
Yeah.
I have the same thing. I said, I wish you knew then.
Mhm.
But how do you let me have you give advice to some folks right now, Anita. What do you tell people in these groups of, yeah, but this is what I have now. How do you deal with that? Because a lot of times what it is folks who are remembering what it was
Mhm.
and wish they didn't have to deal with what it is.
Yeah. And in a way, I think it's a handicap to see the truth too clearly, it's like looking at the sun. You can't look at it too long or you go blind. And so I have to find ways to get a little distance from the pain and from the confusion. And all I can do is tell you what works for me. What has worked for me, and I did not learn this in graduate school, several different things. One is taking photographs of the bizarre things that beloved sweetheart does, because his brain is not functioning. And what that does in taking photographs of his actions, I can look at that and say, no, I'm not crazy. This really happened. So I have proof. And I can even share it with my friends and say, if you think I'm overreacting, this is what's going on. Do you want to show a couple of those? Do you have those, or you want to do that later?
We'll pop those up in a little bit. And get those, because I know you sent something over there, and forgive me, I didn't have them at the ready here today. But that is one way to do that. I wanted to bring in here now too one of our viewers, Kimberly Bass. Thank you for this information. My mother-in-law has Alzheimer's and having a hard time trying to educate my husband and his brothers on this.
Yeah.
What advice do you give Kimberly in this case?
Oh, I'll tell you, sharing those stories, and particularly if you got a photograph, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that is a powerful thing. Writing down what the person has actually done, because you have proof, and that does help. Try to give them some information. Like, there's a wonderful book called 36 Hours. And that means we're working 36 hours in a 24-hour day, and that's really what's happening. Thing. So I think, and also if you can't get through, but another thing to do is to ask the person who doesn't believe you, have them come over and ask if they would stay for a day and just be with the loved one, because usually a person can cover up the mental disability maybe for a few hours, but a day or so, you're going to see something, you're going to hear something. So that helps too. But if they're out of the area, then I think just giving photographs, anecdotes, giving them written information, have them call the Alzheimer's Association. If that doesn't work, just you don't have enough energy, you don't have enough time, move on. Find the people who will listen to you and who will help and who do know that this is a real problem.
We've lost connection from our UTMB folks here. But also too, should as a reminder, not a reminder to folks, but wanted to promote this as one of the ways you can help out locally and get involved, and also find resources is to the coming up here. Let me bring this up so you can see it. Is the Alzheimer's Walk to End Alzheimer's, the local association. That's coming up October the 9th, actually, and we're going to be doing some work with them next week. It's the Alzheimer's Association, Bay Area, Galveston County, 8 a.m. bright and early at Stewart Beach. You want to be out there for that. If you want to find out more, there's the link. It's act.alz.org/Galveston, or you can just dial 713-314-1336. We're going to be talking more about that. And Anita, let me just ask, when you're able to find folks that can, bear with that you hear from, that may come into the group, and they have. Is there ever a story you haven't already dealt with yourself or heard of yourself that,
Yes.
or is it pretty much, oh yeah, that happened to me and my family, and this is why we dealt with it?
Well, because there are different kinds of dementia. There are some unique experiences that people have, but I'd say 90%, maybe 95%, we have the same experiences and the same feelings in common. We don't have enough support. We are aghast at how expensive it is. I've had to cough up another $1,000 a month so that John could be at a wonderful care center called Lippy's Place in Galveston. But when you think about another expense of $1,000 a month, and if I have to put him, God forbid, but if I do have to put him in a residential setting, that's going to be $4,500 to $7,000 a month. And so we talk about that. We talk about the fact that we love our partners and we resent them. We're sad and we're angry. We're confused. There's a feeling, and yet at the same time, we lift each other up, and we can share funny things and really encourage each other. I think even just seeing each other's faces and hearing that other people are going through the same suffering is very helpful. The word, we talk about being compassionate. The word compassion is made up of two parts: calm, meaning with; passion. The word passion means suffering. So it means we are with the suffering of other people. And so when I feel that compassion coming from others and I give it to others, it is a very healing thing. Yeah.
Anita, wonderful woman you are. I gotta tell you something else, and I know John is so lucky. You talk about he married up. That's there's no doubt about that.
I don't think so, but thank you.
And I had not caught onto this as well. For those of you that know her, Anita's daughter is Julie Johnson Robinson. She's the former city manager of the city of Dickinson, breast cancer survivor. You talk one of the toughest people in the world. I know. We'll be talking with her next month, I think, on her breast cancer fight as well. Gibson, now we'll bring in Rafael and Dr. G now back with us here. I will tell you, you heard me mention this earlier too, folks. All of a sudden, our UTMB people all dropped out, and so Anita and I had to carry the show for a little while because I was going to go to the question and answer session a little bit earlier. Someone talked to Ben Raymer and tell him to pay that internet bill a little bit more, over there. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to keep all of y'all on the screen here as we bring it. There's some questions from our viewers. Christina Bailey says, "What are some signs of dementia?" And I'll give you a chance for anyone who wants to chime in on there, because Anita and I talked about that. Those are those things of, oh wow, 5 years ago this was happening, and she said that was just a goofy thing, but may have been a sign of, wait, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So I'll start if you want me to. So any change, any sudden change or any severe change that impairs your ability to do usual activities, that is not normal. So if you forget a word every now and then, that's fine. But if you forget a word every sentence that you're trying to construct, that's not normal. If you lose your car keys every now and then, that's fine. But if you lose your car keys and forget to pay your electricity bill for 3 months, that's not normal. So things that are related to any function of your brain that allow you to live independently and interact with other people, if those things are getting in your way, and your ability to carry on your usual activities. That's where you need to talk to a clinician. That's where you need to start doing some testing, because we need to figure out what's going on. So a lot of people say, oh, forgetfulness is part of aging. No, I know 90 and 100-year-olds that don't forget anything. They are on top of things and they know what they're doing. But again, if you start forgetting the names of all of your children and all of your grandchildren, if you start forgetting that you have grandchildren, those things are not normal. So forgetfulness tends to be the first sign that people recognize. But like Ms. Laffey beautifully mentioned, it's other things that are out of the ordinary and may seem goofy, but when you look at them carefully, they're not goofy. They're serious things that you need to consider. So those are, we could go through a list, but anything related to your brain function that seems abnormal and is interfering with your normal life, those are signs of dementia.
And I wanted to, Rafael, is that one of the things, for example, with my father, he had severe hearing loss. And for the longest time, we really, and I was in that chart that you had, and I was, for the longest time, we'd say, oh, that's just, he didn't hear, he wasn't tracking the conversation. But what we found, and he admitted to later as things were progressing, was that, yeah, I was using that as kind of the excuse to catch up, because I couldn't remember what my answer was supposed to be.
Correct.
Or I couldn't remember who I was talking to.
Right.
How important is it then on these things, not to panic, not to go overwhelmed, but how important is it then if you notice a little something to kind of do something to dig a little deeper, to see, all right, was this China a quirky behavior, as Anita said, or just to kind of track a little bit more, where you can say, okay, this is out of the norm of who the person is that I know.
So I completely agree. First of all, don't panic. But the second thing is always talk to someone. So when something like Ms. Laffey mentioned, so when there is $1,000 mistake, that's a big mistake. That's something that you need to go deeper into. When you forget, you leave your dog outside because you forget you have a dog and the dog dehydrates and you need to take him to the vet. That's not normal. When you've asked to a replacement for your debit card 72 times because you can never find it, that's not normal. When the bank tells you, I'm not going to give you any more debit cards because you've lost too many, that's something that you need to do. And in management of people with memory loss or dementia, the most important thing is the longitudinal follow-up. So you want to get evaluated early, because that's going to be the baseline to how we follow whether you're declining or not and whether things are changing. So we need a baseline for everyone. And so when you start noticing something bad is going on or something weird is going on, that's the time to get tested and to have someone do a baseline so we can follow over time and determine what needs to be done.
And then another question here is Elizabeth Reza, and I think we know the answer to this is, can you reverse the disease? And the answer, I know the simple answer is no. Mm-hmm. But there are things you can do to slow its progression. Is that a fair way to describe it that can be done? And we talked about some of those before. I wonder if we can delve in on that some.
Well, can I?
Anytime. This is open forum, Dr. G.
So can you reverse the disease? I will not venture in a very strong no at this stage. The drug that Rafael just described, Aduhelm, in fact, is in that category of drugs that are intended to reverse the disease, to remove from the brain the toxic proteins. Now, with all the limitations we heard from Rafael, that's the right path. This is a disease-modifying drugs. And again, controversial, but those are aspects that, because of scientific rectitude, that we need to look at. Remember, the scientists, physicians, we are very severe against ourselves. So that's why you perceive a lack of excitement sometimes. It's not lack of excitement, it's caution. But the path is correct. Of course, Aduhelm targets the trigger. Remember my example before. And there are studies, ongoing studies, to develop the same approach to target the bullet. So if in a hypothetical future approach, we might be able to remove the toxic element, both of them, from the brain and understand more of the mechanism, maybe taking care of with other pills, again, not a single pill. Maybe we are on the right path to actually reverse, not only stop, but maybe reverse the course of the disease. So I just want to throw in there a kernel of hope.
Yeah, and even the most kernel of hope there. And maybe I was too short on that, to tell you the truth, to say, no, we can't reverse it at this moment. There's not a reversal.
For sure. Yeah.
But again, it is always every step makes it closer to a reality there. Oma Mori had commented here, said, I've worked with caregivers for years. One advice is to love the person they are becoming. Inside, they are the same person, but with a disease. Bringing them back to reality only hurts them. This is a disease, not just a behavior they can change. And Anita, I would take in many ways, that's the approach you have, but it is so hard. That's where the disease is affecting more than one person at that point, right? It is so hard to do that.
I think it's like walking around. I feel like I'm walking around with an invisible knife in the heart, and it will only go deeper as the disease progresses. But at the same time, I have the most amazing husband, and he still keeps me laughing, even though now there's tears attached to the laughing, because I know that he's not aware of what he's doing that's funny. But even like the other day, he was asking the blessing at the table, and he couldn't remember how do you finish up? In Jesus' name, he couldn't remember. So he paused for a minute and he says, in Jesus' name, bye-bye. I just thought that was hilarious, and he comes up with things like that.
Well, but it to me, and I notice the same thing with my father a lot of times is he goes to a fail-safe, and I use a football term on this, is he went to the safety valve receiver. He knew it was supposed to end a certain way, and maybe it was supposed to be a formal way there, but it wasn't the way the play was drawn up, but it still got there, and you understood it. Yes, you laugh, but you also realize it's the other. But in a way, it's also a realization from the person who's suffering from the disease themselves. Hey, I got something going on here, but I know what I'm supposed to do. I just don't know the exact words. I'm just going to wrap it up and go from here. So there is this inkling of an understanding of what they're dealing with at that time, and so that's a part too. I want to ask our doctors on the panel here as well. One of the things that may be complicating things right now is, and I know that I'm going through this with the long range studies at UTMB on COVID for the long haulers, the brain fog effect. How much is being looked into on COVID and memory, COVID and Alzheimer's, COVID and dementia? As I said, because one of the things, and I'm much better now than I was before, but having to do some test runs and everything else. And when you consider, my family history and the like, that, I got really worried, because I was forgetting common names. Like you said, Rafael, about if you forget whose names, but I found after a while, it was coming back. And so it's more like the COVID form, but how much is being looked at that of what it could be long-term for that?
Well, what I can tell you, TJ, is that NIH and the National Institute of Aging has issued some requests for studies, for applications addressing exactly this problem. We really don't know what are the long-term effects. Now, you must know that there is a very interesting theory of the origin of Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. There is a viral theory. Some viruses become latent, but they survive in our nervous system. The typical example is herpes. And in fact, there is a theory saying that those viruses might be driving or triggering the initial misbehave of the amyloid beta and then tau later on. So there is a great concern for COVID that it has been known to affect multiple organs, including the brain, in ways that is not understood yet. So more studies are needed, but there is a lot of attention to the possible long-term effect. You understand that we've been through this pandemic now basically almost 2 years, so it's early even to hypothesize what could be the long-term effect. But there is concern for this short-term effect on the brain, the fogginess you described, that has been reported by many survivors of the infection. It's something to look at, and my understanding is there is commitment even from the NIH, and it's going to be an important line of research to that end.
There's also a question that comes up a lot: is Alzheimer's disease hereditary? I just mentioned in here, my wife and I talk about this. I think it's a weekly discussion with us. The slightest of things. Both her parents, both my parents. Is there a hereditary connection that's been found in any of the research so far?
So I'll take this one.
Sure.
So
I will then explain the molecular basis.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So early onset Alzheimer's disease has a significant component of hereditary components. So that's one of the few types of Alzheimer's disease. So early onset Alzheimer's disease, it's one of those where the genes play a very important role. In other types of Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, the fact that your parents or your grandparents or a sibling are diagnosed with specifically Alzheimer's disease increases your risk of having Alzheimer's disease when you get older. That it's not a sentence. Not everyone that has a father or a mother with Alzheimer's disease will get it, but your risk is higher. And some people may take that as a death sentence. Oh, so if my dad had it, I'm going to have it, so there's nothing I can do. Other people should take it as an invitation to change a lot of the modifiable risk factors. And if you're able to do that, then you're taking away 40% of your risk factors into having that. So you might win the lottery and not have it, or you might have it later when you're very, very old, and that will give you enough time to do everything you plan and want to do. So there is a component, but only for specific types of dementia. Hereditary is so genes are the main or are a significant risk factor.
Right. And again, bringing up that chart that Rafael brought up earlier about looking at areas that 40, as he mentioned, that 40% in which if you can adjust some things that are preventative, give you a lower risk factor, and to help out there. So that's informative, no doubt about that. A reminder to everyone as well: we do have links up to resources that you can go to, and thank you to UTMB Health for putting together this Alzheimer's Caregiver link up. The researchers, thanks for our friends at the Seeley Center on Aging, and that's one stop that you can go to. But here are everything from the AARP Caregiving Resource Center. You can go online or there's a phone number there. Alzheimer's Association of Houston and Southeast Texas, phone number there for their helpline. I can tell you personally, I use that a lot, and they are just wonderful resource there. Caregiver.com, careblazers.com. There are a lot of resources here for you that you can go on to. We had the link already in the comment section for you to take a look at as well. We also added the link to Libby's Place, where Anita mentioned Libby's Place earlier. They are a wonderful resource for folks there, and you see their website, libbysplace.org. And give them a little bit of a plug here, Anita. I know that they've been a big help to you, have they not?
Oh, yes. John goes to Libby's Place 4 days a week, and they have been wonderful. He calls it going to school. So he takes a little suitcase with him, and he has his coloring, his pencils, his photographs from other times and all. But what they do is they provide fellowship and friendship for him, and exercise and mental stimulation and just new information that, yeah, he's going to forget it in a short period of time. But for right now, he's so excited about it. So they provide respite for me, because I don't have to worry about him when he's in somebody else's care. And I know that he's safe there, which is a major, major factor for me. And I noticed that Oma is there, and she says, "Thank you so much." Yes, Oma has been a godsend for us, because she and I have been friends for a few years, and she knows about dementia. She had anyway, so she comes over and she takes John out for ice cream, for a meal. She'll take him to Home Depot for things. So having somebody else just take him, and I love him dearly, but I'm also glad. It's like with your kids. You love them dearly, but when they get on the school bus, you say, "Thank God." So, yeah.
Well, and we appreciate Oma. She's been commenting all the way through. Dr. G, I'm sorry, I may have cut out. You wanted to follow up on the hereditary side of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, just to probably something that was not mentioned, but it's important because of the audience, that only less than 5% of the cases of Alzheimer's disease are driven by these genes, mutations on genes. So there are only 3 genes. They're called APP, PS1, and PS2. And all of them has to do with the creation and processing of amyloid beta. So less than 5%. That's very important. That's why Rafael said, it's not a death sentence. Absolutely not. Don't panic, because again, that is, and these genes can be assessed. It's not normally done, in my understanding, because of course we don't have a cure, but it's less than 5%. There are other genes that are associated with Alzheimer's disease in a way which is not hereditary, but simply they become additional risk factors. So correcting the risk factors is very important. But again, hereditary is much more a chance that somebody in your family has Alzheimer's disease, but it's not hereditary, than it is hereditary. And if it is very early, in the 50s or something like that, as Rafael said, yeah, there is a high chance. But still, the mutation in these 3 genes needs to be proven. So not having a relative with Alzheimer's disease, even both parents, doesn't mean that it's hereditary.
Right. And I guess, too, it goes to, Rafael, what you had said before, don't panic.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
What he had said
Go to your
about
physician, talk, and don't panic. The earlier, the better. That is for sure.
And maybe the best part of it is, is that make sure you're researching, make sure you're looking at things. Don't grasp on every little thing. It's good to have it. That is information, but make a solid judgment call for you. I don't want to see people going out there and all of a sudden someone posts online, go take ivermectin and it's going to help you with your Alzheimer's too. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Let's listen to the experts here. And I got 2 of them. Well, 3 of them. Anita's an expert too. Trust me. Yes. She's probably, I would think, Anita, you become in many ways, not just a caregiver, you become a clinician as well during all of this. We should probably give you a lab coat like Rafael has on right now too.
Well, thank you. But I do see. Okay. Thank you.
Anita, I'm sure you might know that Frederick Louis, the person who discovered the Lewy body, was the youngest student of Alois Alzheimer. You knew that? Yes, was the youngest student. And he's the one who first observed those aggregates of this protein called alpha-synuclein, which composes the Lewy body. Frederick Louis. It was a real young, brilliant student of Alois Alzheimer.
So,
thank you.
I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. I want one more plug for Libby's Place here. It's a great outreach of Moody Methodist Church in Galveston. If you want to find out more, you can go to moody.org, Libby's Place Senior Day, and we have a lot of folks comment on there that have commented on that they love it and its help. And I wonder though too, Rafael, if that when someone's even in advanced stage of Alzheimer's or dementia, having that constant activity, people where you're doing that helps too, does it not?
Yes, yes, it does. So again, like everything in research, like Dr. Taglialatela mentioned, is it's really hard because what people feel is that they're getting conflicting information, but the truth is we're trying to update everyone with the latest information that we have. So there was a study a couple of years ago that said more physical activity makes no difference for memory decline in people with dementia. And so people said, okay, so let's not exercise anyone that has Alzheimer's disease. Wait. That's not what the study said. The study said that there was no change in decline in people with the diagnosis. But then when you look at other things, so how did the caregiver feel? And so Ms. Laffey has provided us a lot of wisdom from her caregiving activities. And so people with dementia that exercise more have less behavioral alterations. And so that's a big difference for caregivers, because the less behavioral alterations they have, the easier it is for caregivers to care for them. And there are also cardiovascular benefits. So if you can lower your blood pressure and no longer need to take medication, that's a huge benefit for both the person and the caregiver. It's one less medication to worry about. So there are other benefits that we might not publish or measure every time, but I think you brought this up, TJ. You need to take things with a grain of salt and try to interpret what they're trying to share. And yes, exercising more does not affect the decline in dementia, but it brings other benefits that you should take into account before you decide whether you want your loved one to exercise regularly or not.
And it doesn't hurt.
Correct.
That's the big thing. I think we talk about that. Comparing it to the COVID conversations we have every week, people say, how about vitamins? How about this? And Dr. Philip Kaiser, the local health authority, says all the time, it doesn't hurt. So, we don't have anything that says it stops anything, but guess what? It doesn't hurt. So go ahead and do so. I want to go ahead. I think you were to say something there, Rafael.
I wouldn't go that far. So the fact that it doesn't hurt you doesn't give you. So the issue in geriatrics is when people start taking supplements and things, that might not affect your dementia, but it could get you in trouble from other things. So all of that is processed in your liver. So if you're giving them 5 medications for blood pressure and heart disease and whatever, and in addition to that, you're giving them 5 supplements, then you could get in trouble because your liver is going to give up. So be careful, take with a grain of salt. If it doesn't hurt you, then go ahead. Just go through a little bit deeper and say, okay, what am I willing to do and what makes sense to do, even if it doesn't seem to hurt.
Fair enough. And it's a good point. As I said, we get always a measure. I think that's it. Don't panic and always a measure. That's been, I think, the big story we've had out here today. Dr. G, Dr. T, thank you so much. I appreciate you both being here. And Anita, thank you as well. A last reminder to everyone as well. Again, the Alzheimer's Walk to End Alzheimer's is happening on October the 9th, 8 a.m., Stewart Beach Pavilion. You can go online. We have the link already up, and you can sign up there. You don't actually have to walk. Mm-hmm. I just get a flower and just kind of hang out on the beach. It's not bad. There, I just give my money and kind of enjoy myself on the beach that day. I used to MC that event every year too, and hear the personal stories from folks. But the research that the Alzheimer's Association funds, and also I should point out not only the research that they fund, but also resources that they fund that help caregivers like Anita. Is outstanding as well. So you can sign up for that. And we're going to be having more on them and helping promote that event. They actually have a ribbon cutting coming up here soon to kind of give advanced promotion as well, to make sure you do that. I want to thank you all again for coming on. Reminder to all of our viewers, October, speaking of events in October, is obviously Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so Health Care Unmasked is going to go weekly during that time. Each week, a different subject we're going to tackle on breast cancer and really give you the resources, where to go get treatment, survival rates, what's the latest on that, and also promote events that are going to be taking place all around our region in which you can go raise funds to help out in combat breast cancer as well. So that'll be the month of October, just a few weeks away. We're going to get going into that, and that'll be weekly, and we'll encourage everyone that comes on with us to be wearing pink there. Thank you all for coming on with us today. I'm going to have y'all hold on here after I sign out. As well. Our viewers, thank you for your questions here today. Obviously, as soon as we wrap up the show here, this is available for replay. We had a lot of questions asking that are watching on our Facebook page. This is available on the I-45 Now YouTube page as well, and you can share that with your family and friends who may not be on Facebook as well. And we'll add the link here when we're wrapped up. For UTMB Health, thank y'all for sponsoring this. I'm TJ Alds of I-45 Now.